And I know the only reason I want to bring it up now is because I know the time constraints the court has. My intention was to hopefully get a ruling today on whether you believe you established self-defense after Eric Lehr, because there's going to be a colloquy and a decision by Ms. Nachtman as to whether she has to testify.
Right.
It's a huge decision based on what we all now know to be her background and her history. This is not a decision that she is going to be prepared to make at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning or even 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I was hoping to have a rule. I believe by the end of my direct, our case will have been established prior to any experts, and I'd like to make argument on the self-defense issue, but I understand that the court has time constraints.
So would you like to do this? Would you like to do the direct, and then I send the jury home? We'll do the cross tomorrow, and then that'll give us some time to argue, because you're not relying on anything from the cross. Is that all right with the state?
Judge, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. The only thing I can tell the court is, if you've noticed, my crosses have been relatively brief. I'm very familiar with what Eric's going to say. I don't know how long. I don't anticipate I'm going to have a lengthy cross.
Right.
I could, and I don't have a problem.
Yours are much shorter than Mr. Terry's.
And I don't have
no offense, Mr. Terry.
And I don't have a problem if we just want to see where we are.
Right. Let's see where we're at. Yeah. Let's see how long they're direct. But I hear you.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Nachtman is present. Let's bring them in. Jury is present and seated. Everyone else may be seated at the time. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, welcome back. Did anyone have any contact or exposure to the case, discuss the case, or do any research related to the case during the last short break? By show of hands. Let the record reflect no hands. Thank you. We are going to proceed. I'll ask the defense to call your next witness.
The defense calls Eric Lehr.
Eric Lehr. Raise your right hand, please. Thank you. Do you swear affirm any testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right. You'll follow the bailiff around to the ramp that leads up to the witness chair. Please watch your step. When you get to the chair, go ahead and have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. That microphone does adjust. Perfect. You may proceed.
Tell us who you are.
My name is Eric Lehr, L-E-H-R.
And how are you related to Nicole Nachtman?
She's my niece.
Tell us briefly about the siblings and how you are her uncle. Who's the oldest? Who's the youngest?
I'm the youngest of 6. My sister was the next one up, 5 years apart from me. And then it's Peter, George, and then Albert and Louis. I screwed that up. It's Louis, then Albert.
And what about your mother? Is she still alive?
Yes.
How old is your mother?
88.
What about your father? What year did he pass?
2001.
So you and Miriam are back to back, and she was 5 years older than you growing up.
Correct.
Now, as far as nieces and nephews and kind of the family cohesiveness, tell me a little bit about the relationships that you have with your nieces and nephews.
Pretty much all my nephews and nieces grew up in Tampa. My mom raising them because most of my, the ones that have children were pretty much in the military. Okay. So they would pretty much be there sometimes for the whole year, sometimes for the summer, but it was never an empty house.
Now, did you at times also live with your mother even into adulthood?
Yes.
And tell the jury about that as far as time periods of when you lived with your mom and kind of what you did to help your mom.
Well, basically my mom never learned how to drive, so I've been the youngest. I always stayed close to home. So I had a room there, but I wasn't there like 24/7. But a good majority of the time she depended on me to take the kids somewhere or transport her to her doctor's appointments. So I've been very close by, but there's times that I do stay there.
And you were one of the siblings who did not join the military?
Yes, I did.
Oh, you did? When did you get out of the military?
1983.
But as far as the constant, I guess what I meant to say, the deployments that occurred throughout your siblings' careers, that did not apply to you. You were in Tampa after 1983.
Yes, from 1983 on.
And then Nicole was born in 1994. Is that your recollection?
Yes.
Now, your brother Peter was also in the military. Is that correct?
Yes.
And do you know why he was discharged from the military?
As far as I understood, it was some kind of, as far as I understood, it was some kind of depression type of discharge.
So some type of mental illness where it was an honorable discharge.
Yes, it was honorable.
Now, as far as your nephew, Nicole's brothers, Kevin and Joey, what was your relationship like with them during their childhood?
They spent a lot of time at my mom's house, and I would take them pretty much everywhere. So they kind of grew up with me, kind of being like a father figure.
And what year did Kevin pass away?
I'm
2003 sound right?
Yeah, about Christmas time, close to that.
Now, Joey and Nicole was the youngest of all of Miriam's kids.
Correct.
And there's about a 12-year age difference between Nicole and Joey.
Yes.
I want to talk about first when your sister Miriam became pregnant with Nicole. Do you remember where they were living at the time?
I think it was Texas.
And did you ever meet Nicole's biological father, Ronald Nachtman?
No.
Did you even know your sister was in a relationship with Ronald Nachtman at the time she became pregnant?
I didn't know specifically, no.
So is how the family learns about this individual is basically through the pregnancy?
Yes.
Around the same time was your sister going through a divorce with Joey and Kevin's biological father, Joseph Carey Sr.?
I'm not actually sure what was going on.
Okay, if you don't know, that's fine.
Right.
You're not sure when the divorce was?
No.
But you're aware that at some point your sister divorced Joey and Kevin's father?
Yes.
After Nicole is born, how old is Nicole the first time you meet her?
I think 2 or 3.
What do you recall about the custody situation or the visitation situation between Nicole and her biological father?
My sister pretty much made it impossible for Mr. Nachtman to have access to Nicole.
Tell me what you mean by made it impossible.
Well, I know that she was...
Judge, I'm gonna object.
Legal basis?
This is, can we approach briefly?
Yes.
Being Nicole Nachtman from Ronald Nachtman, her biological father.
It seems to me that she spent a lot of time in court blocking his
Judge, I'm
access.
objecting, not what he observed.
I'll caution the witness not to testify to what you know because someone told you. Only testify to things that you have personal knowledge of, which means that you observed them.
At some point after Nicole's born and her childhood, you had indicated there were times when your mother pretty much raised most of your nieces and nephews.
Yes.
And Nicole spent a significant amount of time here in Tampa in her early childhood years.
Yes.
Whether it be on vacations, breaks, or what?
School year too.
And what your sister's attempts at keeping Nicole Nachtman from Ronald Nachtman?
I know there was a lot of court cases.
Okay. And that's, again, observations because she's got a lawyer, she has to go to court, things like that.
And she told me that's what
Okay.
she was doing.
At some point in Nicole's early childhood, do you recall Joey running away from home?
Yes.
Now, there's been a couple of descriptions about runaway, so let's clarify. Was he like running down the street? Did he jump out of a car? Describe to the jury what Joey did to get away from your sister.
He called me and told me he
Don't
would-
tell me what anyone told you.
Oh.
Tell me what you did to facilitate him getting here.
I bought him a bus ticket to Tampa,
And where was he at the time?
Texas.
And he was with your sister.
Yes.
And at the time that the family's made aware that Joey now does not want to live with his mom, the family helps provide the transportation to get him here. You.
Yes,
specifically.
me, right.
And where did Joey come when he ran away from his mom's house in Virginia?
The bus station downtown Tampa.
I meant, where did he finally end up and where did he live for the rest of his high school time?
Initially, he stayed with me and my wife at the time, and then he moved in with my grandmother because his friends lived on that street.
Your mother, his grandmother.
Yeah, his grandmother,
Okay.
which is my mother.
So after he runs away, you get him the bus ticket to come down from Virginia. Now he's a teenager at that point.
He's 16 or 15, yeah, I think it was.
Is he by himself riding
Yes.
the bus from Virginia?
Yes,
Okay. And then never, as far as you understood from your observations here in Tampa, never went back and lived with Miriam again.
he did not.
He then joins the military after high school and is stationed at various locations.
Yes.
So Joey runs away at about 15 and comes to live with your grandmother. Where does Nicole stay at that point? She's 3.
I'm not sure where Nicole was at. It seemed like she was always at my mom's house.
Okay. Do you remember at what point Nicole was, the earliest age you can remember Nicole coming to stay with your mom for a significant period of time?
I would say 5 or 6.
And when Nicole would stay with your mom or stay at her house for these periods of time, would your sister be with her or would your sister drop her off?
My sister would not be there.
And for what reason? Was your sister in the military?
Yeah, she was in the military and she was always deployed somewhere.
Okay. How often, so beginning at about 5 or 6, you're observing Nicole stay at your mother's house
Correct.
for significant periods of time?
Yes.
Are we talking about just on the weekends? Are we talking about weeks and months at a time? What are we talking about?
Most of the time it was like for the school year.
And then would there be times where your sister pulled Nicole back and took her wherever she may have been living at the time?
Yes.
Did it appear to you to be a lot of back and forth as far as where Nicole was living?
Yes.
During the times when Nicole stayed at your mother's house, would you say that beginning from 5 or 6, how long did this go on? Did it go on all the way into high school, college? Did it stop? What was the ages in which Nicole lived with your mom for significant periods of time?
I would say it was pretty consistent between that age and age 16. I think when she went to the academy, the Florida Academy.
And we're going to get to that in a minute. But so pretty much off and on, but for significant amounts of times, from about the age of 5 or 6 to about 16, Nicole is living off and on between your mom's house and with her mother.
Yes.
At some point, does your sister actually give your mother power of attorney over decisions for Nicole?
Multiple times.
And how do you know that?
I observed the form that my sister would give to my mom.
And did you actually drive your mom to the attorney because she can't
Yes.
drive to fill it out?
Correct.
So as far as school decisions, medical decisions, there were times where your mother had power of attorney over those decisions for Nicole?
Yes.
At any point during Nicole's childhood, do you remember her having friends, bringing friends over to your mother's house, anything like that?
None.
Are you aware that Nicole went to 13 different schools?
No.
You didn't know a number, but you knew it was multiple schools.
Well, I really didn't know how many schools.
But she didn't stay in one place for a significant amount of time.
I think the only consistency in her life was being at my grandmother's house.
Your mother's house. right?
Yeah, her grandmother's house, my mom's house.
Now, you said at 16 is the Lehr Academy. Is that the boarding school that your
Yes.
sister sent her to? And you remember that happening about when Nicole was 16?
Yes. I think she spent 2 years, or it might have been 14, I don't know, or 15.
Somewhere in those teenage years.
Yes, yes.
And did you voice an opinion as to whether that was a good idea based on what you were seeing with Nicole at the time?
Yes.
What was your opinion?
She was doing well. She was going to church every Sunday. She was in a good environment, and we couldn't understand why my sister would just, and she wasn't even local. I don't know where my sister was, but she was I don't know if she was out of the country or wherever, but called just to have my niece removed and transported to some academy across the state for boarding.
And again, what you knew about Nicole at the time, was she capable of taking care of herself out on her own, without the support of the family?
Well, at that age, there was really not much to being that age, because she comes home from school and eats and goes back to school.
But your belief was keeping her in Tampa around the family versus across the state
Right.
would have been better for Nicole.
Yes, yes.
And did you all voice that, or did you voice that to your sister?
I voiced it to my sister.
She went anyway.
Yes.
Did you maintain regular contact with Nicole even after those childhood years that we've talked about, and even into the Air Academy?
She would come home on the weekends whenever she was allowed to.
And when you talk about home, this isn't a home that Miriam Deans lived in.
No, I mean my mother's house.
What changes did you observe in Nicole after the Air Academy?
She started acting more pessimistic. She wasn't as kept as she was before she left. She was really big into like makeup and all this stuff, and doing her hair and trying on stuff. And then it just seemed it all stopped when she came back from there. As the weekends went on, she wasn't speaking. She just seemed like she was depressed.
Now, when she would come home on the weekends, she would stay at your mother's house?
Yes.
And you would be at your mother's house and make these observations?
Yes.
At some point in 2004, your sister marries Bob. Tell me about that relationship, or what you all knew about Bob. Did you meet Bob before they got married? Anybody go to the wedding? That kind of stuff.
I didn't go to the wedding. I think I met him once before he got married. We went to visit her in Virginia. I can't remember who all went, but we went up there once.
And so it was your understanding that when they met in Virginia and got married in Virginia?
I'm not sure where they got married.
Did you ever see Bob and Nicole interact after they got married?
No.
Do you remember how old Nicole was when they got married? If it's 2004, if you know.
Well, Nicole's a teenager, I think, at that point.
Okay. Any interaction or relationship that you ever saw between Nicole and Bob?
No.
Would Bob come to family functions after they moved down to Tampa?
I think twice.
Okay. 2 family functions. Do you know how long your sister obviously married until their death? They got married in 2004. How many years that is?
15. Oh, sorry. At the time of death, it would be...
11?
Yes. Sorry.
And you saw Bob at 2 family functions?
2.
Now, in these times when your sister's deployed or she's going on a work assignment, is Nicole ever staying with Bob at their house in Fensbury and Carrollwood, or is she staying at your mom's?
No, she's not staying with Bob. As far as I know, she wasn't staying with Bob because she would just show up there with suitcases sometimes and
Show up at your mom's
at my mom's house and really wouldn't have an explanation, but Bob was in town.
Okay.
At the house.
So Bob lived in Tampa, and yet Nicole was still coming to stay at your mom's house?
Yes.
After 2004 and on, are you aware of Bob ever physically caring for or keeping Nicole overnight if let's say your sister had a work assignment or anything like that?
I'm not aware of any time.
Anytime your sister had a work function, she brought Nicole or
Send Nicole.
sent Nicole
Yeah.
to your mom's house?
Yes.
Describe the relationship you observed between Nicole and your sister.
It was kind of bizarre. In front of us, it was kind of lovey-dovey, but then my sisters had a short temper, so it was kind of limited about how long that sweetness between the two. If Nikki did something that my sister didn't approve of, she would reprimand her right away. It didn't matter who was around.
What did you see as far as Nicole's reaction to her mom?
More of fear. She acted like she was terrified of my sister.
Tell me what the earliest ages you remember observing the fear Nicole had of her mother.
The earliest was during the time of the academy. Those years is when it started.
So 16 or so years
Yes.
old.
Yeah.
And when you say fear, can you explain to the jury what you would observe in Nicole to indicate to you that she was terrified of her mother?
Well, everything she confided in me started with "please don't tell my mom" and ended with "please don't tell my mom."
Was that a common phrase Nicole used to describe your sister?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You know, kids all the time don't want their parents to find out something, or, you know, I don't want them to find out that I spent this money. What did you observe about the genuineness of Nicole's fear of her mother?
Well, it wasn't in a tone, whenever she would say things or confide in me, it was a tone of fear that my sister was going to find out.
Okay.
She sounded scared. It wasn't like a joking, happy comments. These are, please don't tell my mom. And I could tell it was pretty serious.
And you're a parent, you have a son?
Yes.
How old is he?
21.
Do you recall a time in high school when Nicole had an apartment and lived by herself?
Yes.
At the time Nicole was in high school attending or living in this apartment, was there still a local family living locally here in Tampa?
Yes, just a couple of miles away.
Okay. So this wasn't a situation where there was nobody Nicole could have stayed with?
No.
Are you aware of who got the apartment or what the reason for the apartment was that Nicole was living in during high school?
I don't know the exact reason for my sister to get that apartment, but I don't think she was around.
Again, going back to Bob, is Bob in the picture at this point living in Tampa?
As far as I know, he is.
Okay. So they have the house on Fensbury in Tampa. Yes?
Yes.
Nicole's stepfather is living in Tampa.
Yes.
Your mother's living in Tampa.
Yes.
You're living in Tampa.
Yes.
And Nicole is in an apartment by herself in high school.
Yes.
Do you know how long that lasted?
I think she only went to the high school for 1 year.
Describe for the jury a little bit. You had mentioned the common phrase, don't tell mom, became, I guess, Nicole's, what she said often. What types of things did Nicole describe to you or did you observe that would result in this fear of her mother?
Well, I mean, there were many instances, but basically anytime anything had related to food or please don't tell my mom, but can you buy me some M&Ms or whatever, or please don't tell my mom I broke my phone, can you help me get another one, or can we go somewhere to get it fixed, that kind of stuff. She was afraid we were going to tell my sister whatever she had done or whatever she was eating.
Tell the jury about an incident that happened at the mall when you took Nicole.
I went to the mall with my girlfriend and my son and Nikki.
Let's put an age or a time frame.
Okay. I'm thinking it's about about 7 years ago. I'm guessing here. A year before the murders.
Okay, and I know it's hard because this happened 4 years ago, but it happened in 2015. When do you think the incident at the mall occurred?
Probably 2014.
Okay. Tell the jury about what happened when you were at the mall with Nicole.
Well, we invited Nicole to go to the mall. She had to call home to get permission, so she did go with us. We got to the mall, and we're walking.
Let me go back a second. In 2014, Nicole would have been 20?
I think she would, yeah.
19 or 20?
Yeah, 19 or 20.
In college?
Yes.
And she had to call her mother to get permission to go to the mall with you?
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead.
So then we're walking down the mall, and we're walking like in a group, and we turn around, and Nikki disappeared. So we are looking around the mall for Nikki. Can't find Nikki. So I think about an hour or there's a long period of time goes by, we can't find her anywhere. So then I naturally call my sister to find out if my sister picked her up, because my sister had this thing about picking up Nikki from wherever we were at and not telling anybody. So I assumed that it would happen, and I called my sister, and she said she was on her way. She didn't have Nikki with her.
Okay.
So then we finally find Nikki. She's coming from some show they had at the mall, and we tell her that
Would you like a glass of water? Sorry, we can get you some water. And tissue, thank you.
So we find Nikki and we tell her your mom's on her way because we couldn't find you. We were worried about you. And she just busted out crying. Like I've never seen tears shoot out of somebody's eyes the way they did. And we were just freaked out. We didn't know what was going on. She's begging us not to let her go with my sister. And it was just this kind of bawling that somebody is terrified. I mean, like they're going to meet the devil or something. It was just really sudden, and it was so natural, but it was like, it was very, I could see that she was terrified.
And this, you believe, was in 2014, and it was over, just so the jury is clear, her fear that you had called her mom to tell her that she had basically gone missing at the mall.
Yes.
Did you say anything in response to Nicole's reaction to your sister, or ask Nicole, what in the world are you crying, and it's not that big of a deal, anything like that, or any discussion with Nicole or your sister about it?
Well, I asked Nikki what was going on, and she said she can't say nothing. And then I think
Did your sister show up at the mall eventually?
Yes.
Okay. And did you let Nicole go off with your sister?
I asked my sister what was going on, and I said...
Don't tell me what anything your sister may have said, but
Okay.
Go ahead and tell us what you said or what you did.
I just basically said, what is going on? And that was, it was blown off like somebody's pulling my leg.
So the tears and the fear that you saw in Nicole that day, in your opinion, were genuine?
Oh, yeah.
Around that same time, 2014, and I know you said the changes you observed in Nicole started at the Air Academy about 15 or 16, but describe for the jury what types of things that you were observing as far as your niece's demeanor, her appearance. What are you observing as far as changes?
Well, she wasn't talkative like she used to be. She wasn't all happy, bubbly, putting on a show for people like she used to. She would socialize with anybody. In fact, she would walk off at the park and start talking to strangers. That's how she used to be. Where I would have to go get her and tell her, you can't talk to strangers. You don't even know who these people are or whatever. And she would think it's funny. And so basically, she started not being kept. She always looked like what I think would be like a battered woman. She always had that... it looked like somebody had been pulling her hair. She wasn't putting makeup on anymore. Her clothes were not matching and not fitting properly for somebody, that's young and whatever. She would have under clothing that was basically, she would have more than one layer of clothing on. Basically.
So she would wear multiple layers.
Yeah. I don't know if that was the style or whatever, but it was not appealing.
Are you aware about the liposuction surgery when she was a teenager?
After the fact.
Okay. And it's not like your niece was ever obese or extremely overweight as far as you could see?
No.
Did you ever smell a body odor or maybe indications that maybe Nicole wasn't bathing or keeping up with her hygiene?
Yes.
Did you or your mother, when you would observe Nicole at your mother's house, ever comment on her weight or say she was fat or anything like that?
No.
Who in the family, as far as you know, was concerned with Nicole's weight?
My sister.
At any point in Nicole's life, have you ever observed her responding to things that aren't there, talking to herself, talking to people?
Several times. I would just catch her talking to somebody who's not there, like in a chair next to her. That was pretty much the common thing. I think I caught her twice doing that, and there's nobody there.
Okay. I want to break those times up because one of them is close in time to the incident. But let's talk about the first time you ever saw that and when you think that was.
I would say probably about a year before the incident. It was on a weekend, and she was on a lazy boy that we have in the kitchen area or dining area, and she was talking. She was facing the left, like she was looking at somebody and laughing and giggling and talking. I mean, having a conversation, almost like having a conversation with a little kid. It was just bizarre.
Now, there's been discussions that Nicole was on her computer a lot. Is that true?
Yes.
At this instance, did Nicole have an earpiece, or was she talking on her computer possibly, or what did you observe about that?
Well, the computer was folded down, so I don't know if you can still talk to people when it's that much closed, but she did not have an earpiece on.
Okay, so this wasn't her engaging on the computer at all. This was her literally talking to somebody that wasn't there.
Yes.
I'm going to get to the ice skating incident and all that in a minute, but first let me ask you, in all these observations that you've mentioned, you're seeing in Nicole, she's not taking care of herself, she's not bathing, everything you've testified to. Did you yourself ever express your concerns to your sister?
Yes.
And did your sister do anything about it as far as you know?
No.
No interventions, no counseling, nothing?
No.
Did you ever have power of attorney over Nicole's well-being or anything like that?
No.
Let's talk about the summer Nicole comes, August of 2015. Did you see Nicole during that summer?
Yes. She was spending a lot of time at her grandmother's house.
Okay. Was there also a period of time where she went to Washington and stayed with Joey for a few weeks?
I think, yeah. I think I'm not sure how close to that was, but it was over the summer at some point.
And then did you see Nicole after she returned from seeing Joey in Washington?
Yes.
And that was at your mother's house?
Yes.
Tell me about any other instances where you saw Nicole either talking to herself or responding to something that wasn't there during that time period or that summer of 2015.
We were going to go ice skating, my son and I and my girlfriend, and Nikki called her mom and got permission to go. So we went to Clearwater Mall. I think that's where it was.
Do you have a time frame just so the jury?
It was in the evening.
No. As far as the days, like how long before your sister's death do you think this occurred?
I think this is the weekend beforehand.
Okay, so your sister, the week of August 20th, 21st, were weekdays. You believe this was the weekend before?
Yes, because she was leaving for school in a couple of days.
Nicole was?
That's what my understanding was. Yeah.
Okay. Explain to the jury what happened.
So she got permission to go, and we went to the ice skating rink, and we had a good time there. We took videos and all that stuff, and then we stopped at I think it was the Wing House I think it was Wing House. We stopped after ice skating, and we're sitting across the table, and then me and my girlfriend and my son on one side, and Nicole's on the other side with her purse or whatever. I think she was carrying a backpack or something in that seat where she would have her drawing book. Anyway, so we're looking at the menu, and I look up, and Nikki's talking to the chair again. This time there's no computer. She's just talking to whoever she thinks is next to her.
And do you recall, are you able to make out what she's saying when you hear her talking, or what she's saying, or who she's talking to, anything like that?
No, it's a lot of soft speaking with laughing in between. And, okay.
Go ahead.
And I said, Nikki, and no response. I said it like 3 times before she actually turned her face and said, what? I said, who are you talking to? She goes, nobody.
After, let me ask you this. What was your understanding of when Nicole was supposed to go back to FSU that week? or what day was she supposed to be leaving, if you know?
The next day was Sunday. My understanding was she was supposed to leave for school Monday.
Okay. And at any point, did you talk to her again between the ice skating incident and then when you ultimately learned that your sister and Bob have been killed?
Not between.
Okay. Then at some point, after you learn, and tell the jury how you found out about your sister's death, or...
Okay. My mom called me, and I stayed at my girlfriend's house, and my mom left me a voicemail. So when I left for the gym in the morning, around 6 or something like that, the voicemail said to call her, and I called her, and she told me, can you go by my sister's house to verify that the news is right about my sister? So I go right by there, which was probably about a mile away, and
you see the police and everything?
I see the police, and that's when Detective Messer comes to interview me.
Now, at some point, does Detective Messer ask you to attempt to reach Nicole in Tallahassee?
Yes.
And in fact, do you do that? We've listened to a controlled call, the jury's heard it already, where Detective Messer is actually recording a phone conversation that you had with Nicole.
Two times.
Okay. And in fact, Detective Messer is asking you to just find out where she is.
He wrote down questions for me, and he told me to just make it sound natural, like you're having a conversation, but try to get the answers to these questions. In fact, it was him and another detective in the back seat. I don't know who that was.
Do you recall who within the family, if it was you, indicated or at first told Nicole that her mom had been in an accident?
That was me.
Okay. And that was at the direction of law enforcement?
Yes.
And you in fact did that?
Yes, I did.
Now, at the time you're talking to Nicole and Detective Messer is telling you what to say or recording it, she actually says that she's in Tallahassee. Is that your recollection?
Yes.
And you actually tell Nicole, there's a detective that's going to come up there and meet you. Talk to them, please, Nikki. Tell them, what you know.
Yes, that was the second call. The first call was basically to let her know her mom was in an accident, and she said she had no gas money. So she never really asked what happened to her mom. But she asked if she had no gas money, and then I offered I was going to put money into her bank account to call me back with the account number and all that, and I would transfer the money. That was the first control call.
And then the second one was, hey, tell us where you are. She was trying to figure out an address for her new dorm.
Yes.
Don't tell us what Joey told you, but at some point later in that day, you then get a phone call from Joey, who had spoken to Nicole.
Yes.
There's been evidence introduced to suggest that Nicole maybe had not gotten a dorm room in time. Is that something that, in your opinion, based on your observations of how your sister would react to things, how your sister would react to failings or shortcomings of Nicole, that she would have been upset at Nicole with?
Really upset.
Had Nicole not secured a dorm room in time for the fall semester?
Yes.
And based on the observations you have witnessed throughout the years of Nicole, the mall incident, her fear of her mother, is that something that Nicole would have feared her mother over?
Definitely.
Judge, if I can have a moment. Sorry. When was the last time you spoke to your nephew, Joey?
Right after the passing of my sister and Bob.
So you haven't spoken to Joey in 4 years?
Correct.
And as far as your mother, because you lived there at times, correct?
Yes.
The last time Joey had, or how long Joey and your mother had not spoken?
According to my mom.
No, don't tell me what someone else told you.
Okay.
Any observations that you made if they were having contact since your sister's death, if you know?
No contact as far as my mom. As far as I know.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's close enough to 5:30 that you're going to save the cross-examination for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So I'm going to release you for the day. I'm going to instruct you not to do any research related to the case, not to discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else, and also to avoid any exposure to any media or any reports about this case outside of the courtroom. We will start at 9 a.m. tomorrow. All rise for the jury. Jury is exited. Everyone may be seated. You, sir, may step down. You're still on the stand, though, for tomorrow, so please don't discuss your testimony with anyone unless all the attorneys, both sides, are present.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right, I'm sorry, Ms. Derry, but there was no way that...
That's okay, Judge. I get no problem.
So we'll pick up with cross, finish this witness in the morning. Ms. Hersey, you had some argument?
I did, Judge, and I provided the cases to the court well in advance, so hopefully everyone's reviewed it. But my position specifically with Martin v. State, which is 110 Southern 3rd, 936, it's a first DCA case. Judge, this case couldn't be more on point with our facts.
But Martin talks about a condition. There's no expert testimony yet regarding any condition of Ms. Nachtman.
No, there's not, but I think we can talk about what you've read the deposition. I think we can all talk about what's going to be discussed. And this case is absolutely on point in that, first of all, as the state has contended from day one that insanity and self-defense are in some way inconsistent defenses, this case stands for the proposition that if in fact the experts are going to testify that the delusional thinking of the defendant at the time of the act, somehow due to mental illness, can therefore allow the argument that both insanity and self-defense apply. This case is directly on point. That's the only, I don't think there's going to be a dispute as to what our experts are going to testify to tomorrow. It's clear, they've been deposed, and it's on the record. They are going to testify that her delusional thinking was that her mom was literally going to kill her at the time of these offenses. And so I think it's important to point out, Martin, that these defenses are not inconsistent, and that if, in fact, the expert on insanity can testify to the delusional thinking or the delirium, as it's stated in this case, as it relates to the defendant's state of mind at the time of these offenses, the defendant would be entitled to both jury instructions. So I just wanted to start with that case because I know the state's position has been up until this point that our defenses are inconsistent. Then I would point, Judge, to the Spurgeon case, which is 114 Southern 3rd, 1042, and I'll point to page 5, the right-hand column. A trial court's decision to give or withhold a proposed jury instruction is generally reviewed for an abuse of discretion. However, the trial court's discretion is more restricted in criminal proceedings because a criminal defendant is entitled to have the jury instructed on his or her theory of defense if there is any evidence to support the theory and the theory is recognized as valid under Florida law. The trial court, and this is what's important, Judge, because this is what the state's ultimately asking you to do. They're asking you to weigh our self-defense evidence. They're asking you to examine what's been presented so far and for you to weigh what the evidence is. And this case says that's absolutely not what the court should do. That is a jury question, and if there is the slightest evidence of self-defense, we should get the instruction because that's our theory of defense.
What is the evidence, though? That's what, in the cases that they provided, it's not, and now we've backed away from confrontation. It's not her words, confrontation, and even the witness who testified regarding it, he backed off of the confrontation. So the what the F are you doing here is the only evidence that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, what other evidence are you relying on to establish some evidence of self-defense?
Judge, there's an open bedroom window that Ms. Nachtman feared confronting her mother so much that she had to jump out of bedroom windows. This is the house she's living in. If they want to, as their argument has been up to this point, she laid in wait, she laid in wait. Why not sit right there in the living room as Miss Deans walks in the front door and shoot her right there? That's not what happened. The evidence by the state's own admission is an open bedroom window that it is clear that's the window she jumped out of and then meets Mom in the driveway. Her statement to her brother is, I missed time when Mom was coming home. We also know that this was quick because when law enforcement gets there, the front door is open. It's ajar when they do their safety check. So we know from the evidence and from the state's own evidence that when Miss Nachtman or Miss Deans gets home, her purse and her items, we've seen crime scene photos, are right there in the dining room and the front door is still ajar. We have an open bedroom window. I would submit to this court that I don't know very many people that jump out a bedroom window but to avoid contact with the person that, in this case, her mother. There's the incident in the driveway, and what the fuck are you doing here? Now keep in mind, and that's why I cited to the Mobley case, which is 132 Southern 3rd 1160. The objective standard, and I'm on page 4 of the opinion, is applied to determine, in this case they're talking about self-defense, but stand your ground, attaches that the objective reasonable person standard by which claims of justifiable use of deadly force are measured should be applied. That standard requires the court to determine whether, based on the circumstances as they appeared to the defendant when he or she acted, a reasonable and prudent person situated in the same circumstances and knowing what the defendant knew would have used the same force. So now we have to go into Ms. Nachtman's mind. What did she know at the time? She knew that she hadn't got a dorm. That's in her statement as well and as part of the evidence. And that everyone has testified, Joey, Eric, who knew Miriam Lehr, or Deans, that if she hadn't secured a dorm, her mother was going to go off. And that was going to be a justified reason for her to be terrified of her mother. Remember, it's what Miss Nachtman knew at the time. She didn't have a dorm. Her mom, she's jumping out her bedroom window. She's coming in the driveway. And in her mind, based on years and years of belittling and psychological abuse and wanting to hide things from her mom and fearing that her mom was going to somehow explode or whatever, that was the fear she was exhibiting at the time she shot her mother.
But do you disagree with me that the person still has to do something? If I fear you, if I have a legitimate reason to fear you, whether it's because of a mental illness or anything else, if I have a legitimate reason to fear you, can I shoot you without you doing anything?
There has to be an overt act by the victim. I would submit to you that the overt act by Miss Deans is, what the fuck are you doing here? That is not, hey sweetie, you're not in college yet, you missed your time to leave. I would submit to you that in Nicole Nachtman's mind at that time, who we've heard was like a child, who we've heard couldn't take care of herself, who we've heard, again, it's an objective standard, but in the circumstances as Miss Nachtman knew them. So we're now heard testimony that she was childlike. She loved Elsa. She loved Frozen. She couldn't bathe on her own without somebody telling her. She couldn't wash her clothes. She didn't know how to cook. So now you have this child. Don't look at her chronological age of 21. Look at Miss Nachtman and what you've heard testimony of people who knew her at this time and described her as. And her mother says, what the fuck are you doing here? That is not an invitation to, hey honey, let's go talk. That's the evidence of self-defense. I'd submit to you, and I'd argue simple, which is the case that says it's the slightest evidence of self-defense, and it's not for the court to weigh the evidence. If we've introduced any evidence of self-defense, we're entitled to the instruction. For the record, simple is 972 Southern 2nd 912.
Mr. Terry, how do you suggest that you get around Martin versus State?
In Martin versus State, Judge, you have independent witnesses who observed them coming onto the property, okay? The defendant in that case is heard yelling, get off my property, I'm going to get guns. So there's clear evidence in that particular case that that defendant is in fear and is responding to outside stimuli.
But they're uniformed police officers, where a normal person wouldn't be able to justify those thoughts in self-defense. But the court in Martin says that because of his mental condition, even police officers coming to his house to arrest him or for whatever reason they were there, support it.
Correct, Judge, but there is overt actions. There's testimony from independent witnesses to what occurred. There's testimony that the defendant was clearly in fear at that time about people coming onto his property. So there is evidence that's been put in. The only evidence suggested here is the mom saying, what the fuck are you doing here? Which is what, I don't know how that's an overt act. I don't know how that's a forward-thinking act.
So is it your opinion is it your position that the opinion of the first district in Martin would be different if the police had just showed up and said, come out with your hands up, as opposed to what the fuck are you doing here?
Correct.
A statement.
Correct. In his reactions beyond that, and the fact that they came on the property. There's all sorts of differences, Judge. And beyond that, let's not forget the next statement that she gave to her brother. I blacked out after that. So we don't even have her admitting the shooting or acknowledging what her mom did or what she did as a result of it. So she blacks out. I provided, Your Honor, a case. I don't have them all in front of me because I wasn't
I read them. I have them here.
But there's a case where
He just says it's self-defense.
it says
when
it's
they come
self-defense,
up,
but he
and that's not
blacked
enough.
out.
But there's nothing in that regarding, like in Martin, such a severe mental condition of the defendant in that case. And I agree with you. That's all they had to rely on was he says to the police, it was self-defense. And the court says that's not enough. But there's no discussion in that case had he had schizophrenia or had he had delusions and all that, whether it was self-defense. I still don't think that it would have been enough in that case.
Judge, my position on the circumstances is, again, taking into account the dorm. And again, the reasonable objective standard in somebody in Nicole Nachtman's position. The reason for the dorm, the comment about if I'd only got the dorm information, you have to take it all, the totality of everything that's been presented. We know she didn't have a dorm. We know that from the paperwork. We know that from the housing. We know about when she got the paperwork. And every person that knew Miriam Deans and Nicole Nachtman said that in Nicole Nachtman's mind, that was a legitimate reason to have feared her mother. So there isn't just the overt act of, what the fuck are you doing here? But there is that mindset of Nicole Nachtman. And again, our experts are going to testify tomorrow that her schizophrenia, her delusional thinking, her paranoid thinking, she literally thought her mother was going to kill her at that moment. And that in and of itself explains how, or puts into context, the dorm room and how she really thought her mom was going to kill her. And so I think you have to look at it in the totality.
And Judge, I agree. Let's look at it in the totality. The totality is that she had the chance to leave that place long before her mom ever arrived. She was on the phone with her mom just before her mom arrived. She could have left at any time if she was so in fear and so afraid of her mom. She not only didn't leave, she moved her car so her mom wouldn't see her car there. She still waited at the house for hours for her mom to arrive. This is not a woman who was in fear. This was a woman who laid a trap. All the evidence suggests this is premeditated, first-degree murder, luring the mother in. There's nothing to say that she just happened to be sitting in the house, not knowing her mom was coming, with the car there. The mom walks in and says, what the hell are you doing here? And then suddenly she gets freaked out.
Yeah,
and
So if we look at the totality of the circumstances,
the court reporter can only take down one. Right.
So if we look at it in the totality of the circumstances as she's suggesting, then there is absolutely zero, zilch, nothing of self-defense. And there's no way, Judge, if we're going to take a statement by an individual of what the fuck are you doing here and turn that into self-defense, then we're going to have self-defense cases all throughout this circuit constantly in any case.
Well,
because that's just a statement. It's not an overt act. She was confused. And Judge, you don't have the benefit of this, but the statements that she's made to the psychiatrists in this case, and the doctors in this case, is that the mom looked like a deer in headlights. Well, where's the self-defense there? The mom's like a deer in headlights. She's like, what are you doing here?
Well,
so again, there's no overt act.
And those are obviously arguments, if I allow it. I'm not saying I'm going to allow it. Those are obviously arguments you can make to the jury. And if there is no evidence of it, I mean, the jury's going to be instructed on. My concern is, if I don't allow it, and I should have, we're going to do this case again. Now, that doesn't mean that just because of that concern, I'm going to give them something that they're not entitled to. I'm telling you that it's close. And Martin, and I hear you. But now, and again, even whether I agree with Martin or not, I've got to follow it unless you have something. I understand the case that you want to rely on, the second DCA case, and when I read that case, I was with you. But that case doesn't have the mental illness like Martin does. So if you have something else that brings in the mental illness, then I'm willing to consider it. I'll give you time until tomorrow. But I want to address because my concern too, I share your concern that if this is an open door, just anybody can come in and claim self-defense if they fear somebody. But that's not the case. It has to be somebody in the same situation as Ms. Nachtman and anticipating the testimony of these experts. But I haven't heard. I read the deposition of Ewing, I think is his name. But I apologize to you not being able to give you that. I need to hear it, and I need to hear the cross-examination of him before I'm going to be able to decide this. So I'm not giving you an answer today. And I know why you wanted it, because you want to have time to discuss with her decision whether to testify or not.
Yes, sir.
But I don't know why you can't have a conversation with her about if the judge rules this way or if the judge rules that way.
Well, because how we would have presented our case would have likely been Ms. Nachtman before the experts, just to indicate, a basis for their opinion, and to kind of put them on after her would be the position. Judge, I want to point one other additional thing, and I know the court has to go. We also have information about the close range firing of these. And we know from Dr. Krastowski, that one shot is, and I demonstrated, was less than 2 feet away from muzzle to wound, and that the other two, all he can tell us is more than 2 feet away. And so I believe that that's also evidence to show this wasn't a football field distance, she wasn't at one end of the driveway and the other end of the driveway, that these were within 2 feet of each other, one closer than 2 feet when she shot. He can't tell us the order of the gunshot wound, so he doesn't know if the one that's less than 2 feet is the first one. What the fuck are you doing here? And there's an open bedroom window that the evidence has indicated Nicole Nachtman got out of to avoid her mother not lay in wait for her mother.
So you're relying, let me see if I can summarize it as this way. You're relying on the close nature of the contact between her and her mother, in addition to the mental state and the statement of what the fuck are you doing here?
Yes, sir. And Judge, and I understand we have not presented Dr. Ewing, but as I stated before, based on the deposition that the court has reviewed to indicate what his testimony will likely be, it is going to be that she literally feared her mother because of the delusions, because of the paranoid thinking, because of the abuse she had suffered for years, and that is exactly in line with Martin v. State. And based on that, we'd ask that you grant our request for the self-defense instruction, and like you said, the state can sit there in closing all day and argue why it's not self-defense, but that's not the standard as to whether we get an instruction on the law or not.
And let me just make sure I'm clear. You're not asking for self-defense as to Robert Deans.
Correct.
And Judge, lastly with Martin v. State, I do believe, Your Honor, if you read the facts and look at the facts compared to this case, it is different. It is different because these officers were approaching him. He was making, and all these officers testify that, he was making threats, telling them, get off my property, I'm going to get guns. That's a lot more evidence that this person was in fear, that it was trying to defend himself. That's a lot of evidence to suggest that. Now, granted, the mental state gets to the next level of saying that's why he didn't realize they were uniformed officers, so he was in fear. But regardless of that, the fact that they were advancing on his property, the fact that he was yelling to them, I'm going to get a gun, get off my property, adds to, that's a lot more evidence than what we have here. A lot more. And if you read the rest of her cases, they all have a lot more evidence than what just these words, what the F are you doing here? A lot more evidence.
And Judge, I would just point out, as in Spurgeon, it's not for the court to weigh the evidence, that's for the jury. The issue is, are we entitled to the instruction? And I
agree at the end. There's some evidence. The evidence is the close range, the what the fuck are you doing here, her mental condition. I'm going to allow it.
Thank you, Judge.
See you at 9 o'clock.